Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm super excited because I have a partnership with The Gap. Thank you for sponsoring this video. Just kidding, I do not. I just thought it was funny because I normally don't think I wear branded stuff when I film videos, but I noticed I did today, so I just wanted to make a little joke. Anyways, today I'm reviewing the book The Road by Cormac Mccarthy, and I gave this book an easy, but I was really surprised to give it a 5 out of 5. Today, my Booktuber shout goes to Shaking in My Boots. I came across the channel pretty recently. She is a smaller booktuber that started the channel within this past year. She does a mix of TBRs, wrap-ups, and hauls. She also does some booktube tags. If you want to show her some support, I'll link her channel down below. And as always, if you're watching my videos, I always appreciate it if you can hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have read The Road or any works by Cormac Mccarthy, please comment down below, or if you have seen the movie as well. The genre of this book I would put as post-apocalyptic, also a bit of survival. When I read about the author Cormac McCarthy, it seems he specializes in post-apocalyptic writing and also focus on Western and Gothic. I'm not sure if I really got Western or Gothic in this book, however, I'm not well versed in these genres. But definitely there's a post-apocalyptic and very big survival genre going on. This book was also published in 2006, so pretty recently, which I was surprised by because I saw a movie I think within the past few years, so it's pretty cool how movie adaptation got picked up pretty quickly after the book being released in 2006. A bit about the author Cormac McCarthy. So he is American, born and raised mostly in Tennessee. He is a novelist and playwright, and as of today, I believe he's 89 years old, and he has written for a very long time. His first novel was published back in 1965. It was called The Orchid Keeper. However, in my experience of exposure to him, his more recent works, which is The Road and No Country for Old Men, were actually published more recently in the 2000s. I think The Road was 2006, like I said, and then No Country for Old Men was 2005, which I guess now for 2022, that's almost like 20 years ago. But for me, it seems pretty recent still. And also, both those books, The Road and No Country for Old Men, have also become movie adaptations. Since he started his writing career, in the 1960s, he's also written 12 novels, 2 plays, and 5 screenplays, and 3 short stories. And I said before, he kind of specializes in Southern Gothic, Western, and post-apocalyptic genres. In addition to the genres that he is most well known for, his writing style is also very unique, which I picked up right away in The Road, which is basically he has very graphic depictions of violence. He also uses very sparse punctuation. I haven't read his other works, but in The Road, for example, there are no quotation marks when it comes to dialogue. Each dialogue from each character is just one line. It's very succinct and simple, which I found very unique when reading it, and I'll talk more about it in my review. Some interesting facts I found about Cormac McCarthy is that one of his quotes is, "If there's an occupational hazard to writing, it's drinking." So he's been sober for decades, which I find very admirable, as I am also sober from drinking the past few years of my life. And another interesting fact about him is that it could have changed since then. When I read this fact, who knows? But as of the date of the article I read, which is a few years ago, he does not own the computer, and all the writing he does for all his books, and I guess all his writing in general, is done via a mechanical typewriter. So I'm gonna put a picture of a typewriter because I'm not sure if younger people on Booktube know what a mechanical typewriter means, but this is what it is. The premise of this book. So basically, the story just starts, and we see that there is a man and a boy, and we pretty quickly find that the boy is the man's son. We never know how old the man and the boy is, but you can kind of deduct that the boy is quite young. I would say probably under 10 years old. And so basically, they're just walking. They have a shopping cart full of their belongings, and the way that the environment is described is very clear is in a post-apocalyptic world. It is never clear what happened or how long it's been since the event. However, it's safe to assume that no one knows, and maybe there's some like nuclear warfare or disaster because there is ash everywhere wherever they go. They do come across some people. I don't want to spoil the book, obviously, but no one is very friendly. So for me, I get the impression that a bit of time, maybe years, have passed since the event. So people are just on survival mode. Um, it also alludes to that the the man and the boy, there was a wife slash mother in the picture, but she had left without spoiling the situation. So we come to learn that the boy was perhaps born or shortly born before the event. So we basically follow, in this book, we basically follow the man and the boy, and they have a goal to move south. It's also safe to assume, at least in my perception, that the book is set in America, and they also in the book reach the coastline, so maybe um, the western coast, or maybe that's just my preconceived bias because I live on the west coast. Um, but yeah, basically they're on a journey because they have a goal to go south, and they have to keep the fire going inside them. And the book is interesting because they meet people along the way, and people aren't so friendly. And the man always puts him and his son, the boy, as the good guys, and everyone as, we can presume, the bad guys unless they prove otherwise. And the book's just so interesting because, in a way, like nothing really happens because just their day to day. And Cormac does such a great job describing the minute details. However, also when things do happen, it's also really intense, and it's just a really great read. And yeah, this book is just amazing. And like, there's also a movie adaptation of Viggo Mortensen that is really good. I want to rave that I actually watched a movie a few years ago before I read this book. However, even though I knew what was going to happen in the book, the writing is just done so well that I'm like, oh, I can't believe that's happening, or whoa. So if you haven't watched the movie, don't watch it. Read this book first and then watch the movie. However, if you had watched the movie, it's still worth reading this book. And yeah, it's just written really well. Common themes in this book. This is actually quite a short and easy book to read in terms of like length, because there's lots of lines that are just set for dialogue, but each dialogue is short and they take up each line. However, being such a short book objectively, I feel there's so many common themes that are unearthed because it's set in a post-apocalyptic world. So the first common one I noticed that was prevalent throughout the book is the idea of good guys versus bad guys. Because if you think about it, every story you read, you always just assume the protagonist is the good guy. But it's just because we're reading it from their perspective or in their scope. But if you think about it, like, everyone thinks they're a good guy. No one ever thinks they're a bad guy, right? Because we're all living for our purpose and for our life. But we're all probably a bad guy towards someone out there. So I thought this book was very good at doing that. And I think the interactions between the man and the son are so interesting because the son, the boy is still very young, and so he has a very like not jaded view of the world, but the man has seen shit, and he's seen stuff that's happened even before the event and the post-apocalyptic world. So the son, or the boy, sorry, I should say the boy, as that's what he's referred to in the book, is always thinking the best of everyone, but the man's always thinking of the worst. And it's not like negative of the man, it's just because in this future, a post-apocalyptic world, it's literally every person for himself, which then leads to the second thing is about sacrifice. Because there, you know, whenever I watch post-apocalyptic movies or read these books, whenever there's a child, I'm like, ugh, that adult is gonna die or something's gonna happen, right? Because if you have a child, you're going to do everything you can to have that child live, and you can't really think for just yourself. However, in lots of survival situations, you don't even have the capacity to think to help anyone else, especially when it's super dire. So this book also talks about, in this situation, the man has the boy to take care of, but he also gets mad or gets short with the son or the boy because the boy is thinking so optimistically. But in this world, there's literally nothing you can sacrifice. You can't even give like a morsel of a meal to someone else, because if you give that to someone else, that means you're taking away from yourself, and there's just not enough to give. So That was the second theme I found prevalent through the book, the idea of sacrifice. How, like, right now in my life, of course I can be generous. Of course I can donate. Of course I can give time to others. But in the post-apocalyptic world, I can't think like that. So this book really talks about that. And it's interesting to have the boy there to counter the man. Um, the other thing I found interesting in the book that was prevalent was the idea of what is there to live for when you don't know if first there is anything on the other side, and if you kind of know there is nothing on the other side. Like, why do we live? Do we live because our body physically keeps us alive, or do we live because we live on the hope that there's something to live on? But what if you can kind of safely assume there is nothing to live for? So in that case, is existing just enough to be alive? Or maybe there's some like not pleasure, that's kind of like twisted to say, but maybe it's okay to die. Like, I don't know, like this Cormac does such a great job about talking about the idea of, is it worth living for, just to live and just to exist, or is it better to just die because you know that life is so bleak and you kind of know there's nothing to live for, and sometimes there's some honor in just choosing to die. I don't know. It's very interesting, and the book did a great job about that. And the last theme I noticed, which I kind of touch on these all these previous themes, is the what humans are capable of in dire situations. And when I say dire situations, I mean resorting to cannibalism. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like, I like to think I would never eat a human, and I like to think that in a situation I would die before I eat a human, or we just starve together. But I don't know, maybe in a situation, if it's just me and the other human, and I know that I'm not going to eat them, but they're going to eat me, and am I going to die being like, okay, I'll sacrifice my body to let this human live? Or maybe I'll kill them, and maybe I won't eat them, but maybe I'll kill them to protect myself. I don't know. It's very interesting. I love to hear your thoughts down below. This book was just, the more that now I'm talking about it and thinking about it, I feel it's like it's a philosophy book, It's just, it was so great. As I gave this book a 5 out of 5, there were nothing really I didn't like. The only thing that I thought I was going to not like when I started the book is, if you're a chapter reader, this book, I wouldn't say steer clear because I'm a chapter reader. So when I started reading this book, I was kind of nervous because there are actually no chapters in this book. You just go straight through until the end. And I was like, ugh, at first. But honestly, it's so good. It doesn't matter. And also, like, the way he writes is, it's not a chapter book. However, there are really short paragraphs, or like maybe at the most 2 pages of scenes. So you could just stop at a paragraph and you can just dive in, and it doesn't feel like you're like cut off at a weird time. But that was my only, I guess, negative review about this book. Other than that, like, this is a high 5 out of 5-star read. What I liked about the book, I mean, I think it's very clear from when I talked about everything so far in this video. There are so many things I like, but I'll just summarize it for you. I loved the dialogue between the man and the boy. It was very realistic. It was very bleak. There were some glimmers of hope, and there's just so much room for interpretation. And like, Cormac does such a good job where I really believe sometimes few words can say so much. I don't know. Just amazing. This book is great. One thing I also really like that I haven't mentioned yet in this video is, I thought it was a very realistic portrayal of what a post-apocalyptic world would look like, because I feel a lot of times in movies and books and TV shows, yes, a post-apocalyptic world can be violent, and yes, it can be full of action and survival, but I find that they always still glorify it, as in there's this kind of like hero aspect of it. But in this book, there really isn't. And it just was, I feel like, very realistic. Like, I always say that if there was ever a zombie apocalypse, I will be the first to die. I'm not going to be the last standing survivor. I probably won't make it. And this book really validated my belief in myself, in how I would fare in a post-apocalyptic world. On Goodreads, this book got an average of 3.98 out of 5. I am very shocked because I disagree with that so much. I feel this book is so great. However, I do want to say that on Goodreads, it was very divisive. People either loved this book and gave it a 5, or people gave it a 1. there wasn't a lot of like 3 or 4s or 2s. So I guess I can see why it's 3.9 out of 5. And in that case, I guess it is accurate because there's so many ones to drag down the average. But man, this book was just so great. And I feel like even though I saw the movie within the past few years, I might rewatch it now that I've read the book. So reasons why people don't like it. And you know what? I can agree with it because at first when I started reading the book, I was kind of nervous because of the writing style of Cormac. So people thought it was repetitive, they thought it was slow, they thought it was simple, they thought there was not really a plot, and they thought it was very bleak. Yes, I can see that all these points are accurate, but I think it's one of those books that's like a slow burn that maybe when you read it at first, it feels like all this, but then it all builds up to this bigger picture. And overall, this book is amazing. So, yes, I disagree with these points, but they're valid and I can see it. I think people just need to maybe let this book like marinate for a bit and let it sit and really think about it. And it's just great. I think people also gave this book a low rating because of maybe seeing the movie first and all the hype that the movie got. And when they read the book, just having a different medium for the story can be very jarring. So I understand why people also gave it a low rating. Reasons why people love it, if you've watched this far in the video, you know why people loved it. Very similar for me. They thought it was gripping, terrifying, heart-wrenching. However, still very beautiful. And it was disturbing, but realistic. And, I agree with all of this awesome, awesome book. Why I think you should read this book. I mean, if you got this far, I think I have sold you on reading this book, or at least I hope so. But if you should read it if you like post-apocalyptic scenarios, survival scenarios, a lot of what would you do, a lot of, if I was in a situation, how would I act? It's just a great book. Now I'll share how this book made me feel because if you watch my videos, I always love asking if someone recommends me a book, how it made them feel. Because if you ask me a week, a year, 5 years from now, I probably won't remember exactly what happened in the book, but I'll always remember how it made me feel. However, having said that, I'll probably remember exactly what happened in this book. Maybe not each situation, but the premise of it. So this book, it made me feel very haunted, but in like a beautiful way. It just made me feel a lot of reflection about the human experience, what it means to be alive. It made me feel like haunted in the sense that if I was ever in a survival situation, what humans are capable of. And yeah, it's just a really great book. Really recommended. I've said it so many times. Thank you for watching my full review for The Role by Cormac Mccarthy. I don't have the physical copy with me, but it was a well-loved, used physical book. I don't have it for me because I finished it and it was so good that I gave it to my coworker to read right away. So if you read this book, please comment down below on what you thought of it. I'd love to talk and discuss this book because I feel there's so much to talk about, and this is why I make Booktube, to have discussions. If you want to join me next time, total 180 in the genre of books is I'm reading TaylorJenkins' Reid, anticipated release of 2022. Carrie Soto is back. I'm super excited I got my hands on this because I'm actually, if you know just the background, I'm actually back at my mom's house for the month of November, and I went to a local library. And a local library here is for the smaller community, so really trendy books aren't picked up. So this book was available for me to pick up. So I'm super excited. So far, it's really good, and I love the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, so I'm sure I'm going to love this book. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.